All right, you know, I've been doing these talks for probably almost 18 years, and at least since the last 10 years, I've always led off with a slide like this from Dr. Grannon. Her name was brought up a couple times the last day or so, but it's talking about the animals, giving them a decent life, giving them a painless death, and know the animals respect, and that's kind of my concept as I went through my career at Smithfield, Cargill, and now at Arrowsight, about how we treat the livestock and what's expected of us from a production standpoint. And again, so Cargill and Smithfield is two companies I work for prior to Arrowsight now. As a journey, in this one here, it's hard to read from the back. At least my eyesight's getting bad enough as I get older. It's hard for the read the smaller writing here. But this talks about a rat race, and a different section of a rat race basically is a lack of understanding and education probably on all sectors of the supply chain. Producers are independent. Obviously, they're conservative by nature, and sometimes they only really care about what happens on the farm. Packers kind of get caught in the middle. We're kind of a policeman at time in the past, and we have to try to implement some programs out there that our customers want. Consumers just want wholesome food and inexpensive food. I think that, in a general part of it, is what they desire. Customers often promise, and Tim's comments, bless his heart, you know, I enjoyed what he had to say there. There's not a lot of our customers that I've worked with over the past 18 years that had that kind of boldness and mentality about them to call it like it is. But sometimes they promote unrealistic things, non-scientific things, and detrimental demands on the supply chain. And that's where that rat race basically helps the activists, the critics, the anarchists, whatever the name's been used or what's going to come out of this to use for that, to describe them. That really plays into their wheelhouse to allow them to make progress in the C-suites of some of our customers. So again, because of all that, you've already seen the slide, that causes this kind of phenomenon with our customers and with the end consumer. It's a list of people you trust. With all that negativity out there, and that's going to kind of get into some, I could spend the rest of the day just talking about the undercover videos that come out to cause this kind of a problem right here. But with that kind of scenario, all right, I'll get coordinated here in a second. With this type of information out there, so I think 2 years ago, I was given a talk with these next 3 slides in them, and talking about how the industry is, you know, basically painted a picture of this kind of panacea, old McDonald's farm, and blaming the Disney organization for doing some of those things. And as I was talking about that, I'm realizing I'm talking to the Disney chefs. They're in the audience. And they're shaking their head, yes, that they understand that they propagate some of this anthropomorphism that causes some things, because in real life, you see pictures like this, and this is Fair Oaks Farms. Anybody been to Fair Oaks Farms in Indiana? So you've already seen this before if you went to the dairy and not to the pig one, and it's their operations there. So it's that kind of lack of understanding by the general public of what real modern agricultural production looks like. So again, I don't want to spend much time on these. Just to give you kind of an example of what we dealt with over the last few years and what we're going to try to help deal with moving forward. And Michelle's comment about compliance, SOPs, kind of dovetails very nicely into what the last part of my talk is going to be about. So from an Arrowsight standpoint, Arrowsight, Cargill, when I was at Cargill the last 10 years, put Arrowsight into our facilities back in 2008, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we go forward here. But this was a watershed moment. How many people remember this? If you can't read, it's Hallmark Westland, 2008, January 30th. So I guess I took my job at Cargill probably 30 days before this happened as that global lead of animal welfare. And comes out where you can see, yeah. Game changer, absolutely. 143 million pound beef recall. Congressional hearings. I know Kay, where did Kay end up going? I know she was heavily involved in this, pulling people together. Dallas in the back was pulling people together. Multi-species coalitions got together. You know, basically FSIS changed their harvest program with non-ambulatory cattle, increase in customer inquiries. I think I sent letters out to almost every customer under the Cargill umbrella, and regulatory changes on those non-ambulatory animals. So it was a big deal. And the aspect of that came in when my bosses called me in and said, all right, Mike, are we solid in all of our programs? And it comes back to Michelle's comment about compliance. I says, I think we are. I think we're compliant. But to quote Mark Twain, it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And so I think we're good, but I'm not sure. How do I be sure? We got 10 facilities on the beef side. We got 4 turkey plants, we got 2 pork plants, we got multiple feedlots, multiple hog operations, turkey operations, broilers, egg layers, the whole bit. How do we know for sure? So, in terms of doing that, I connected with Arrowsight back in 2008, the NAMI meetings there here in Kansas City back in October, And from that point forward, we put the Arrowsight system in our operations. And basically what Arrowsight is a remote video auditing analytics system that does what Michelle's talking about. It talks about compliance. It's not a third-party auditing company, but it's in the operations basically 24/7, ensuring compliance, helping with improvement, and maintaining that sustainable improvement over time. So when you have that third-party audit coming in there, and they say it's 100%, because a month before the Hallmark Westland undercover video came out, they had an audit, 100% on the audit. They were perfect. Well, they were perfect doing that audit, but the things that were happening before and after maybe weren't quite so perfect. So that's where we put the information in there and saw our results. And we'll go through that in here in a little bit. But in terms of what it is, it has the ability to generate automatic and meaningful analytic data. It'll help you manage your operations, either SOPs or improvements in what you see in terms of managing your system better. It's just not about catching people doing bad things. It's not Big Brother looking over your shoulder. It's about improvement of your operations, making sure, again, I didn't know Michelle was going to talk about SOPs and some of those issues, but it's making sure you do what you say you're doing, and you do it all the time. You got the animal welfare audits that you base on national standards, and I know that with Kate and Ken, what they were talking about in terms of those standards and their certifications out there, what do you base it on? That's kind of up to the customer you're dealing with. We use national standards, at least in the plants we use the NAMI standards. On the beef side, we use BQA, et cetera, NTF, NCC, UEPA, going on down the line. But it's immediate auto verification and feedback, and they will catch those potential occurrences if you do see an employee doing something that's out of the scope of the SOPs. So that's basically what it looks like. That's at a slaughter plant, looking at receiving. You got the audit screen there. That's basically what the auditors look like. We're based in Huntsville, Alabama with the manufacturing side, and New York with the international side. There's the serpentine going up to the knock. And there's a knock, so you actually have auditors evaluating these. These are plant pictures. We're also heavily involved right now with on-farm applications. That was the next evolution. It started in the plants, and then as you see the pressure coming out from the activists, the extremists, it moves on to the farm, and that's where we're doing most of our information applications right now is on-farm application. So the same quote, but the bottom is that trust but verify. So what did we see when we did some of these applications internally? And you can see down there, and I got the pointer here. So as you would expect, this is blinded data that we looked at the application while the person was standing with a clipboard, lab coat, doing the information, standing over your shoulder watching. The gray bars here are what the camera saw when there wasn't anybody around. And you would hope that they would be identical. You'd hope, that's your part about you think you know what's going on, but you're not sure. So while somebody's standing there watching them, they're doing their job. While they're not watching them and the camera's seeing them, they're not doing their job. But when that information gets fed back to the general manager of this particular plant, it took about 2 weeks right here, and then everything fell right in a line because you had a very strong, firm manager in this particular plant. The next one, again, just how the data works. And again, I know a lot of people think animal welfare is fascinating. Human behavior is just as fascinating as animal behavior by far, by far. And the next one will really show you that in greater detail. But we had a plant here that made their improvements. They did a nice job. They improved their operations, but they said they've done everything they can do. They've tweaked everything they can. They can't do anymore. Well, that other plant that got them down there, we sent them out there to watch what they did. Well, lo and behold, a little bit of peer pressure, and all of a sudden, they got in line like that. So that's how the human behavior worked. And the last one here, this was the most fascinating to me, and I guess it kind of makes sense. But the tall lines there on the first part are first shift operators. The gray lines here are second shift operators, and to save time here, first shift operators are basically seniority folks. They've been there basically their whole lives. They know everything there is to know. You can't teach them anything. It's like, that's kind of like me. I know everything. And the new guys here on second shift have been just trained, freshly trained, still green, but doing exactly what they've been told to do because they do not want to lose their job. Well, the guys that know everything were probably cutting, just not doing the detail. I know what to do. I don't have to know. You don't have to tell me what to do. I can do it. But once they saw the data, oh my, you talk about being embarrassed. And then within 2 days, they were right down there, almost at zero non-compliance. They were perfect. So that's some of the things you see. And it's just that human dynamic, that human behavior that's just absolutely fascinating. So in summary, real quick, we're going to see enhanced programs and audit requirements. Everybody's talked about that. That's not going to go away. We're going to see an increase in possible legislation. You look at some of the things, so we work globally in Canada, we work over in the EU, and some of the things that kind of migrate their way back into the States. We'll probably see some of that pressure. We're already seeing some things on the transportation side from FSIS. We've seen those kind of issues. We're going to see enhanced efforts by the activists. They're going nowhere. I think Tim said they're using it as, using us for their payroll to make their bank. And if that's the case, they're not going anywhere. And we also see increased pressure by our customers to raise the bar, have meaningful changes with realized expectation and documented compliance. So again, we're working on that route, and that's where I think the Arrowsight helps a lot of companies, especially some of the bigger companies that have multiple sites, to make sure they ensure that compliance, to ensure that that is sustained and they make that continual improvement.